Chapter 421. It's alright. Xianxia actually didn't really like eating it. The taste was too strange. It was both sour and sweet. But since it was a gift from this woman, he would just have to put up with it. Xianxia felt that it wasn't that bad after all. Is that so? Luo Qingtong supported her forehead with her hand and looked at him with a smile. In the next second she leaned forward. I'll have a bite too. As she spoke, she took a bite of the candied haw in front of Xianxia. She bit off more than half of the candied haw at the spot where he had just bitten. It's pretty good, Luo Qingtong said as she licked the candied haw at the corner of her mouth. Her smile was enchanting and wanton. Let's eat together? Yi Qianren looked at the candied hawthorn in front of her that was half bitten off and then looked at the moistness on Luo Qingtong's lips that she had just licked. Her eyes darkened. He slowly nodded and took a bite at the spot where Luo Qingtong had bitten earlier. His cold and gloomy gaze was fixed on Luo Qingtong. It was the gaze of a man looking at a woman. It was also the gaze of a hunter looking at his prey. Gloomy, fiery, and determined to win. It was just that Yi Qianren's figure was too small and too cute. Instead, it covered up the dangerous aura within. Luo Qingtong lowered her head and bit into the candied haw, so she didn't notice it. On the other hand, Little Pig caught sight of the expression in Yi Qianxian's eyes. He couldn't help but cover his eyes. Oh my god. This woman is just acting. Let's see what she'll do in the future. The two of them finished the candied haw together. Seeing that it was getting late, Luo Qingtong found a secluded place and took out the spirit boat flying ship. He brought Yi Qianren and Little Pig on board. For the next few days she would stay near the Blackfield subsidy and wait for Chu Lingfeng to bring her news. Every day Luo Qingtong would enter the city and sit in the private room for a while. Yi Qianxian and Little Pig stayed in the ship. Luo Qingtong knew that Yi Qianxian didn't like being locked in her sleeve, so she didn't put him inside. 3 days later, Chu Lingfeng happily brought his mother to thank Luo Qingtong. Master. My mother is well. Mother, this is Master. Chu Lingfeng excitedly introduced his mother to the two of them. The woman standing behind Chu Lingfeng was about 30 years old. She had a gentle and calm temperament and was very magnanimous. Just by standing there she gave off an indescribable aura. Mississippi, she bowed deeply to Luo Qingtong. Thank you for saving us. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid we would have died. Feng, wouldn't have had such a great opportunity to enter the holy court of the Empire of Qin. Thank you, miss. Luo Qingtong smiled indifferently. No need to thank me. This is what he deserves with his sincerity. Luo Qingtong didn't care who the recommendation letter was for. Since Chu Lingfeng was loyal to her, what harm was there in giving it to him? She always did things as she pleased, so she didn't need a word of thanks. As Yen Yang watched, she felt even more grateful to Luo Qingtong. Even if Feng followed her and recognized her as his master, as his mother, she would still be very gratified. Even if Miss says so, it doesn't change the fact that you saved us. As she spoke, she bowed deeply to Luo Qingtong. Chapter 422. Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up as she heard this. She was indeed a bit worried about the Blackfield subsidy. After Chu Lingfeng left, she didn't have anyone she could trust. It wasn't that she couldn't transfer people from the Luo family, but those people might not be familiar with the situation in the Blackfield subsidy. It would be difficult to take over. Moreover, Luo Qingtong had many people under her command, but the only ones she truly trusted were Su Yu and Chu Lingfeng. Of these two people, one had sworn an oath to never betray her. The other was loyal and pure, wholeheartedly devoted to her. Only these two people were the ones she trusted the most. Now that Yen Yang had taken over the Blackfield subsidy, it couldn't be better. Luo Qingtong could see that Yen Yang was not an ordinary person. The other party's aura was different from others. Obviously, there was a reason why they had fallen to this point. Although Luo Qingtong didn't understand Yen Yang, she understood Chu Lingfeng. The other party would never betray her. As Chu Lingfeng's mother, Yen Yang could also be trusted. Thinking this, Luo Qingtong nodded and settled this matter. With Luo Qingtong's permission, Yen Yang took over the Blackfield subsidy. She quickly handled the matter properly, and Luo Qingtong didn't have to worry about it anymore. She even handled the matter of the cooperation with the Bloody Arena very well. She had shown great skill in dealing with it. The pills given by Luo Qingtong under her operation set off a storm in the entire Blackfield. No one thought that evil Dr. Ghost Eye could actually refine pills. Even though Luo Qingtong had only refined the lowest level of elixir and had purposely lowered the retention rate of the elixir, it was already shocking enough in the eyes of everyone. In the true Spill continent, the status of alchemists was transcendent. Then the status of alchemists could only be described as rare. The alchemists of true Spill continent were all old monsters that had lived through countless years. Every one of them was immersed in the path of being an alchemist. Who knew how long it would take for them to stand out from the ranks of alchemists and be promoted to an alchemist? Even a Saint Realm expert would not be able to move these people. But now, there was an alchemist in such a small city in the Black Field of the eastern border country. In an instant, the entire true Spill continent shook. Many forces came one after another. Luo Qingtong's medicinal pill finally sold for a sky-high price. However, the people from various forces were still unwilling to give up. They were searching for Luo Qingtong everywhere. He wanted to rope in this alchemist. However, Luo Qingtong was too good at hiding. Everyone asked around, but they didn't even know who evil Dr. Gui Tong was, where he came from, or what he looked like. Not to mention trying to win him over. The other party was backed by the Black Field, so it was impossible for them to use force. Suddenly, everyone was burning with anxiety, looking for evil Dr. Gui Tong everywhere. Luo Qingtong's reputation as an evil doctor also rose rapidly after this auction, almost reaching the peak. For many people from large forces, they might not be able to invite an old monster-level alchemist, but they had a great chance of inviting evil Dr. Gui Tong. Naturally, they were very concerned about this. Yan Yang and the others also received a great deal of attention. At this time, Luo Qingtong was incomparably glad that she had saved Yan Yang. Otherwise, how could that big fool Chu Lingfeng deal with these matters? It would be strange if he wasn't skinned alive by those treacherous forces. Fortunately, the one in charge now was Yan Yang. Chapter 423. Great Yong Dynasty. Looking at the news that Yan Yang gave her, Luo Qingtong frowned slightly. It turned out to be someone from the Great Yong Dynasty, but the specific identity still needed to be investigated. The information from Blackfield was very vague. It was said that the other party's identity was hidden very well. They also spent a lot of effort to find out the approximate origin of the other party. It would take time to continue investigating. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. Even Blackfield couldn't find out the origin and identity of the other party in the first place. It could be assumed that the power behind the other party was not small. The background of the person behind the scenes was not simple. Sure enough, it was someone who couldn't be offended. Luo Qingtong's eyes turned cold. Let Blackfield continue investigating. Report to me when you get the news. Okay. Yan Yang nodded. After she left, Yi Qianming emerged from behind Luo Qingtong. If it was my people who investigated, they would have found out long ago. He looked at Luo Qingtong as he spoke. If this woman went back with him, this small matter would have been solved long ago. Don't try to fool me. Even so, I won't let you go back. Luo Qingtong pinched his little face. It didn't matter if the person behind the scenes was found out sooner or later. Anyway, she was not in a hurry to confront the other party. Let's go back. There was not much time before the opening of the Tianyu branch school. Luo Qingtong wanted to go back to the Luo family to explain everything and prepare everything. Only in this way could she leave without any worries. Luo Qingtong received a large amount of money from the elixir auction this time. After giving some to the bloody arena, Luo Qingtong still had a lot of money left. Luo Qingtong left some for Yan Yang and some for Chu Lingfeng. She also left some for Su Yu and the others. This time she also received news from Chu Lingfeng that Su Yu had teleported back. The other party had already gained a firm foothold in the far west wilderness. It wouldn't be long before he could establish his own force. He didn't expect Su Yu to be so fast. Luo Qingtong knew that she must have suffered a lot there. It wasn't easy to make a name for oneself in a chaotic place like that. Looking at the letter sent by Su Yu, Luo Qingtong asked the people of Blackfield to help deliver a batch of medicinal liquid and medicinal pills. Luo Qingtong was not afraid that the people in the Blackfield would find out about her contact with Su Yu. She had a working relationship with Blackfield, so these things would definitely not escape Blackfield's eyes. Since that was the case, why bother to cover it up? There was nothing wrong with letting the Blackfield know. At least with them around, no one else would know. As for the matter of her developing forces in other places, Luo Qingtong believed that even if the people in the Blackfield knew about it, that high and mighty man knew about it, he would not do anything against Su Yu and the others. That man, Luo Qingtong thought about it and realized that Yi Qianxian was a person who kept a clear distinction between public and private affairs. Although he was angered to death by her every time and couldn't catch her, he had never vented his anger on Su Yu, Tu Lingfeng and the others. He had also never used the people around her to force her to show herself. This was quite rare. After all, this kind of person in a high position would vent his anger everywhere if he was unhappy. Luo Qingtong had seen a lot of this in her previous life. The ugly face of a person in a high position. In contrast, Yi Qianxian was unexpectedly clean and principled. Should she say that he was worthy of being the man she admired? Chapter 424. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong's eyes curved. He picked up little Mingzun and kissed him on the cheek. Humph. Yi Qianxian's face darkened after being rejected by Luo Qingtong. Now that he was kissed, he was gone. Forget it. This woman is too cautious. She won't believe anything I say. She will only think that I'm trying to find an excuse to escape. I'll just wait for my main body to catch up with me. Anyway, I can't wait for too long. Yi Qianxian knew that with his ability, even if his divided soul was imprisoned by Luo Qingtong, he would still be able to find out where the Holy Pen Spirit was. This woman had calculated everything, but she definitely didn't expect that the aura of the Holy Pen Spirit could be found. As long as he could find out the identity of the teacher who dared to attack Luo Qingtong, then Luo Qingtong's true identity would be exposed. Thinking of this, little Mingzun was no longer angry. Swoosh, swoosh. On the spirit ship, Luo Qingtong was focused on carving something with a piece of wood. In front of her there were all kinds of parts. There were all kinds of big and small parts. Luo Qingtong bought a bunch of ores and materials when she left the Blackfield city of Dongli Nation. Little Pig thought she was going to refine tools. But he didn't expect her to just sit there and start carving wood. What are you doing? Little Pig jumped in front of her curiously and used his little hoof to fiddle with the parts on the table. Why does this thing look so familiar? Where have I seen it before? Little Pig thought as he propped his little hoof up and down. On the other side, Yi Qianxian's voice sounded. Is this the weird weapon you used in the Nine Magi Mountain? Little Mingzun walked with his hands behind his back to a part that Luo Qingtong had just finished carving. He picked it up and looked at it. Then he looked at Luo Qingtong. When he caught Luo Qingtong in the Nine Magi Mountain, he caught the weird weapon tied to her arm. It looked like a crossbow, but it was very skillful. The mechanism inside was very complicated. It was obviously an ordinary weapon, but the power it displayed was comparable to a spiritual weapon made by an ordinary weapon refiner. Most importantly, it didn't have any cultivation restrictions. He didn't have to worry about not being able to display its full power. After Yi Qianren obtained the crossbow, he brought it back for his people to study. What surprised him was that once the crossbow was disassembled, it couldn't be put back together. At that time, several elders of the tools department had even come to find him, hoping that he could find the person who had made this crossbow. It wasn't because he couldn't find it, it was because he couldn't find it. Moreover, if he found this woman, he would run away. Until now, Yi Qianren did not have a chance to ask Luo Qingtong about the crossbow. Now she was playing with it. Yi Qianxian only needed one glance to know that it was the same as the parts that came out of the crossbow. Before he met Luo Qingtong, he never thought that weapons could be like this. Yi Qianxian's expression was a little strange. He looked at the scattered parts. Those who didn't know would never know the use of these weird things. Who would have thought that these things, which were big or small, long or short, had no purpose at all and looked like abandoned garbage, would become such amazing killing weapons after they were successfully assembled? Chapter 425. Yes, Luo Qingtong nodded. But what I'm going to make now is not the crossbow from last time. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pinched Yi Qianxian's cheek. What's that? Yi Qianxian looked at the spare parts that filled the table. In his opinion, these spare parts were no different from the spare parts of the crossbow he saw last time. Idiot. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a smile. If I use that crossbow, won't I expose myself to you? Luo Qingtong didn't believe that this man didn't take the crossbow's drawing to find someone. Therefore, even if she were to make a weapon for the Luo family, she wouldn't make a crossbow. Moreover, although the crossbow's effect was good, Once a martial lord cultivator could form a protective layer of energy, the crossbow might not be able to break through. What she wanted to make was an even more ruthless weapon to be used as a trump card for the Luo family. What's that? Little Ming Zun looked at her. His big and cute phoenix eyes stared at her without blinking. This guy, how long has it been? He already knows how to use this shell to act cute. Luo Qingtong felt her heart itch from his stare. She really wanted to kiss him again. At this moment, Little Pig also remembered the scene on Nine Magi Mountain after being reminded by Yi Qianxian. He stared at the spare parts that Luo Qingtong was cutting and said with his mouth wide open, "Is this a weapon similar to the crossbow you made? Oh, it's much more powerful. Much more powerful." Luo Qingtong looked at them and narrowed her eyes slightly. What she made on Nine Magi Mountain before was a simplified version of the Zhuge repeating crossbow, which didn't take much time. However, what she wanted to make this time was a weapon that was more complicated and lethal than the Zhuge repeating crossbow. A spear. Swish, swish, swish. Luo Qingtong finished all the spare parts while she was chatting with Yi Qianxian and the others. She quickly assembled the parts. In fact, these parts were not particularly difficult to make, but because of the high precision required, except for Luo Qingtong who had the eye technique, no one in this different world could make such a weapon. Do you want to try? Luo Qingtong created a high-precision pocket-sized gun. When she held it in her hand, almost no one could see it. She raised her hand and aimed at Little Pig. The moment she moved, the latter felt a chill run down his spine. Without thinking, he jumped up and tried to run away. Oh my god. This woman was going to make fun of it again. However, just as it jumped up. Bang bang bang. Luo Qingtong fired her gun. In the blink of an eye, Little Pig felt as if countless gusts of wind brushed past his body. In an instant, a pig-shaped silhouette formed by countless small holes appeared behind it. If Luo Qingtong wanted to attack Little Pig, all of these holes would have landed on Little Pig's body. What? F***C. Little Pig fell to the ground with a thud. He looked at the pig-shaped silhouette in the air and stared blankly. Too fast. The speed was too fast. Before Little Pig could react, the bullets had already flown out. Not only that, the frequency of the shots and the strength of the attacks were too strong. Little Pig stared at the round holes on the flying ship with wide eyes. If he wasn't mistaken, Luo Qingtong didn't use any of her strength. How could she create such a powerful attack? Oh my god. It's too scary. Is this still an ordinary weapon? It's almost as powerful as a spiritual weapon. However, a spiritual weapon can only be used by a person who can use it. Chapter 426. Zhou Xian also stood up from the table. That pair of large and slanted phoenix eyes stared at the circular hole that had appeared on the spaceship. His eyes were burning and shining to the extreme. How did you do it? This was clearly just an ordinary mortal weapon. Luo Qingtong smiled but didn't say anything. She couldn't explain to Yi Qianxian the so-called air principle acceleration and so on, so she could only remain silent. However, this gun model was very much to her liking. Based on the power of this gun, if it was made with specialized refining materials, its power should be even more powerful. Luo Qingtong made a rough estimation. Even if it was a martial lord expert, they would all die. As expected of the Terminator of the Cold Weapon era, a great killing machine. It was a pity that it relied too much on bullets. Once it ran out of bullets, it would be useless. It would be great if this problem could be solved. While Luo Qingtong was pondering, Little Pig was already squealing when he saw the round holes made by the bullets. Oh my god, if this was made with spiritual energy, I wouldn't even know how I died. Her speed and strength were too strong. This was just an ordinary mortal weapon. If she used her strength, wouldn't she be able to use the least amount of strength to achieve the greatest lethality? A low-level martial artist could also instantly kill a high-level martial artist. This was simply too terrifying. This completely subverted the rules of refining. He didn't know how this woman's brain worked. She was actually able to create such a terrifying killing machine. If those refiners knew about this, they would probably go crazy. Little Pig's words instantly reminded Luo Qingtong of something. If all these bullets were turned into spiritual energy, then, was it possible to create an energy-gathering array on the gun and use the martial artist's strength to activate this array to absorb the spiritual energy from the outside world and turn it into spiritual energy bullets? But how should she do it? The volume of an array was too large. It was impossible to condense it on the gun. Moreover, it was impossible for a spiritual array and a weapon to be perfectly integrated. Suddenly Luo Qingtong thought of something. Inscription. Luo Qingtong immediately thought of the inscription pattern that Little Pig had told her before. If it was an inscription pattern, wouldn't it be possible to realize her idea? If she could really create something that could convert spiritual energy on the gun, it could replace bullets. Then the gun she created would become a terrifying killing machine in this strange world. As long as she activated the inscription pattern on the gun, she could obtain an endless supply of spiritual energy bullets. Not only that, with the inscription pattern technique she might even be able to create interstellar weapons that only existed in the 24th century. And let them exist in this strange world in a different way. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong laughed. Humph, you've helped me a lot this time. After she finished speaking, she went to research the inscription pattern. Without an introductory manual, he couldn't learn it. Dawn. Is. However, when Luo Qingtong really did it, she realized that imagination was beautiful but reality was cruel. The inscription pattern on the life and death yin-yang sword was broken in half. Luo Qingtong heard from Tian Mingzi that the inscription pattern was not completed. She thought that the front part was finished and only the second half was left. Who would have thought that the inscription pattern was broken in half? Luo Qingtong looked at the half-completed inscription pattern and felt a headache. Chapter 427. This sovereign has an inscription tool. He looked at Luo Qingtong. You can comprehend it however you want. As long as I go back with you, right? Luo Qingtong continued his words and pinched his rosy cheeks. Don't even think about it. I'll think of another way myself. By the way, where's Humji? Luo Qingtong looked around and found that Little Pig was nowhere to be seen. That guy, where did he run off to? I don't know. Xianxia coldly snorted when he heard Luo Qingtong mention Little Pig. His voice was even colder than before. He looked at Luo Qingtong's rosy lips and suddenly reached out his hand to fiercely rub them a few times. Then he left with a cold face. At the same time, outside the airship, Little Pig's round belly was tied with a rope. He was being used as a kite. Ah! Little Pig was swinging back and forth behind the airship with the wind. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. Oh my God! That man is jealous. Shouldn't he be looking for trouble with that woman? Why am I the one being taught a lesson instead? There's no justice in this world. Ah! A strong gust of wind blew. Little Pig's chubby body was swung back and forth along with his miserable shrieks. He was only put down when they were about to reach the Luo family. After that, Little Pig became well-behaved and was determined to keep a distance from Luo Qingtong. Damn, that man is too scary when he's jealous. Most importantly, he was the one being taught a lesson. Luo Qingtong didn't notice this. During this period of time, she was busy making guns for the Luo family. As for Little Pig, she thought that it had gone to sleep. The poor Little Pig's calves were swaying from the wind, but no one knew about it. Grandpa, these are for you. After returning to the Luo family, the first thing Luo Qingtong did was to give the guns she made to Grandfather Luo. The Luo family's iron soldiers were currently recuperating, so they could practice their spear techniques. Once they were proficient in using these spear techniques, the Luo family wouldn't be bullied even if their strength couldn't increase in a short time. At first, Old Master Luo didn't know what they were. When Luo Qingtong demonstrated the power of these guns to him, he was shocked and hurriedly protected these guns as if they were treasures. Luo Qingtong found it funny to see him like this. Grandpa, I'll leave these guns to you. Please distribute them to the Luo clan's iron army. I've already written down the specific training methods. When the time comes, you just have to follow the instructions and train them. Luo Qingtong explained the taboos and techniques of these guns to Luo's grandfather. Mr. Luo listened carefully. Under the guidance of Luo Qingtong, he fired a shot and instantly fell in love with this unprecedented weapon. The grandfather and grandson spent the whole day in the yard. Grandfather Luo finally mastered some shooting techniques and he didn't miss any shots. For 3 whole days, Luo Qingtong stayed in the Luo family. If she wasn't making bullets, she was explaining the gun techniques and assembly methods to Grandfather Luo. It was as if Old Master Luo had obtained a new toy. He took apart and reassembled the gun that Luo Qingtong had given him. He was amazed by all sorts of things. In his opinion, this weapon made by Luo Qingtong was too stealthy. It didn't have any energy fluctuations and didn't need to be powered. It was powerful and fast. It was really a killer weapon. Such a weapon was actually made by his granddaughter. Grandfather Luo was very proud of it. If it weren't for the fact that this weapon was the Luo family's killer weapon and couldn't be easily exposed, he would have already taken it out to show off and let everyone see how powerful his granddaughter was. Chapter 428. Luo Qingtong didn't stay in the Luo family for long. After dealing with the matters of the Luo family, she left with Yi Qianxian and Little Pig. This time she didn't take the flying boat but left it in the Luo family. This way, if something happened, the Luo family could find her as soon as possible. Moreover, she didn't have much use for the flying boat in the Tianyu Branch Academy. Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianxian, and Little Pig hurried all the way and soon arrived at the imperial capital of the Tianyu Empire. The entire imperial capital was unusually lively these days. After the end of the enrollment season, students from various countries under the jurisdiction of the Tianyu Empire began to come to the Tianyu Branch Academy to register. On the streets, there were all kinds of young men and women coming and going. Luo Qingtong wasn't in a hurry to enter the Tianyu Branch Academy. There were still 2 days before the public registration day, so it was useless to go there early. At that time she would have to make a trip there again. She rented a room in the most expensive inn in the imperial capital and put Yi Qianxian and Little Pig inside. Then she set up layers of formations to prevent Yi Qianxian from going out and also to prevent people from accidentally breaking in and harming them. Only then did she leave in disguise. The Lanyue family. Luo Qingtong hid in an alley not far from the entrance of the Lanyue family. Her lips twitched as she looked at the densely packed people hiding around the Lanyue family. Needless to say, these people were definitely sent by that man to hide here and keep an eye on her. In order to catch her, that man really didn't let go of any possible place. Luo Qingtong looked at the purple invitation in her hand and was speechless. Forget it, if she really went there with this invitation, she was afraid that before she could reach the entrance of the Lanyue aristocratic family, she would be snatched away by the man who was keeping watch outside the door. He had to find a way to get in. For Luo Qingtong, as long as she could smoothly enter the Lanyue family, she could easily detoxify the poison and leave. After all, the poison wasn't particularly difficult to detoxify for her. As for the follow-up treatment, the Lanyue family had a lot of resources, so there was no need to worry about not being able to nurse the little boy back to health. He just had to remove the poison and leave. With this in mind, Luo Qingtong stayed there waiting for an opportunity. Wave after wave of people who had set up defenses and were keeping an eye on them left. At this moment, clatter clatter clatter. A horse carriage was approaching from afar. Luo Qingtong looked at the luxurious carriage. When she saw the engraved emblem of the Lanyue family, her eyes suddenly lit up. If he did, he would use the other party's carriage as a cover to enter. Luo Qingtong carefully observed and discovered that the coachman driving the carriage was surprisingly a guard of the Lanyue aristocratic family. The person sitting inside must be a direct descendant of the Lanyue family. He had the purple invitation card from the Lanyue family. As long as he took it out, they should cooperate with him. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong's eyes turned. She bent down to pick up a stone and pinched it in her hand. When the carriage passed by the alley, Luo Qingtong raised her hand. With a whoosh, the stone happened to be stuck in front of the left front wheel of the carriage. With a bang, the carriage suddenly jolted. The curtains hanging on the carriage were raised and the 8 treasure bells jingled. In just an instant, the carriage suddenly tilted toward the alley. The angle of the tilt wasn't too big, but with the cover of the raised curtains, Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly swept up like a ghost. With a whoosh, she disappeared into the carriage. Chapter 429. Boom. An incomparably vast and powerful aura suddenly blasted out of the carriage. Sword essence. She sensed the fierce and brazen aura of the attack that seemed to be able to cut through everything. Luo Qingtong's pupils shrank slightly. It was actually a sword essence attack. The so-called sword essence was the fusion of a martial artist's cultivation with his own swordsmanship when he cultivated to the extreme. The sword was in him and the sword was in him. At such a realm, the opponent's every move, even the slightest thought, carried a majestic and fierce sword chi. which was comparable to a martial emperor expert who had achieved oneness of heaven and man. The person sitting in the carriage was actually such a person. Could it be that she had accidentally run into the carriage of the master of the Lanyue family? But this carriage clearly did not belong to the master. Luo Qingtong should have recognized it. Could it be that the master of the Lanyue family had a sudden inspiration today and sat in the carriage of a junior? Luo Qingtong's thoughts raced, but her body did not stop at all. Swish. The red light in her eyes intensified. In an instant she saw through the weakness of the opponent's sword essence attack. Her body twisted like a snake. Luo Qingtong's body seemed to be soft and boneless. In an instant she passed through the weakness of the sword essence attack. With a boom, the attack passed through the place where Luo Qingtong had been standing, through the flying carriage curtain, and heavily smashed not far behind the carriage. Young master. Luo Qingtong heard the guard outside anxiously call out. Young master? Luo Qingtong raised her eyes slightly. She had already rushed in front of the guard. The purple invitation in her hand was infused with energy and became as hard as steel, pressing against a certain part of the guard's ribs. Don't move, Luo Qingtong said indifferently with narrowed eyes. I mean you no harm. The aura on this purple invitation is very obvious. It belongs to the Lanyue family. You should be able to sense it. Your visit is very special. The sound that entered his ears was clear and sonorous, like the sound of jade and metal striking each other. It was very pleasing to the ear. Luo Qingtong looked up and saw a handsome young man sitting in front of her. The man wore a purple jade gold crown on his head. His face was like jade as if it had been cut and polished. He looked like a bandit gentleman. However, the aura around his body was piercingly cold and sharp, like an unsheathed sword, diluting the aura of a jade-like gentleman. Young master, are you all right? The guard driving the carriage hurriedly asked. I'm fine. Yan Yuju's voice was indifferent. While Luo Qingtong was sizing him up, he was also sizing up the girl in front of him. It was really surprising that his opponent had easily dodged his sword intent attack. This was the first time Yan Yuju had failed against a martial artist whose strength was lower than hers. Sword intent was originally an extremely domineering attack. Yet now his sword intent had been dodged. And at close range when the other party was completely unguarded. Yan Yuju looked at the purple invitation that Luo Qingtong pressed against her ribs and said indifferently, You have my Lanyue family's highest invitation, so you can enter directly. You don't need to use this small path. Is that so? Luo Qingtong looked at her and smiled lazily. I also want to. Unfortunately, I have an enemy here, so I can't show myself in the open. So, young master Lanyue, I'll have to trouble you. Luo Qingtong said that she was being held hostage in an open and honorable manner. It couldn't be helped. Who would be willing to sneak in like a thief when they had an honored guest? Wasn't she being forced by that man Xianxia? Chapter 430. A voice suddenly came from outside. Brother Zhu, why did your carriage suddenly stop here? What was with the attack just now? Are you okay? Outside the carriage, Wuxia stood there with a happy face. Although she was saying words of concern, her gaze was completely different from what she was thinking. With Brother Zhu's strength, how could something happen to him in the Tianyu Empire? Wuxia was just taking advantage of this opportunity to talk to Yan Yuju. As the most pampered princess of the Tianyu Empire, Wuxia naturally knew Yan Yuju's identity. This young master of the Yanyu family, who almost no outsiders knew, was the reason why the family was prosperous and no one dared to provoke them. Although the Yanyu family had settled down in the Tianyu Empire, even the great families of the sacred dynasty had to be wary of the other party's background. And all of this was because of Yan Yuju. Wuxia had been warned from a young age not to cause trouble for the Yanyu family. In the Tianyu Empire she could provoke anyone but the Yanyu family. Especially Yan Yuju. In the past, Wuxia didn't understand why Yan Yuju was far superior to her royal brother Yuwenma in terms of talent and strength, but the one who was called the #1 genius of the Tianyu Empire was Yuwenma. Later she found out that it was because Yan Yuju was from a different world from them from the beginning. The title of the #1 genius of the Tianyu Empire was not worth mentioning to the other party. Now that Yan Yuju's carriage had an accident, Wuxia was naturally happy. This was a great opportunity to get closer to the other party. One had to know that she almost never saw Yan Yuju. Even when she occasionally heard that the other party had returned, the latter would quickly leave. She almost never had a chance to see her. Now that she saw Yan Yuju's carriage stop here, she said as she lifted the curtain of Yan Yuju's carriage. Luo Qingtong was just thinking that the voice outside was familiar when she suddenly saw the curtain being lifted. Her eyes instantly turned cold and she subconsciously leaned in front of Yan Yuju. At the same time she tugged at the blue and white moon robe that the other party was wearing. It covered half of her body and even blocked the purple invitation card that was filled with energy and was pressed against the other party like steel. Big Brother Zhu. Yuan Shui's face was filled with joy as she lifted the curtain. She had just called out shyly when her expression instantly changed. "Who are you?" she shrieked. "Why are you in Brother Zhu's carriage?" Yuan Shui looked at the scene in front of her with an ugly expression. Luo Qingtong just happened to be leaning on Yan Yuju's knee. From Yuan Shui's point of view, it looked like Luo Qingtong was half lying on Yan Yutian's leg. The young girl's body was covered by a man's robe, covering half of her body. Because Luo Qingtong was in a hurry, the front of Yan Yuju's inner robe was pulled open a little, revealing the exquisite white collarbone and slightly exposed chest. And because Luo Qingtong's right hand was holding that purple invitation card that was filled with energy, it was sinking into the blue and white moon robe. In Yuan Shui's eyes, the other party was shamelessly seducing Yan Yuju. Her hand was already inside the robe and she didn't know what she was doing. Instantly Yuan Shui's eyes turned red with anger. "Slut." She raised her hand and slapped Luo Qingtong. Chapter 431. However, Yuan Shui didn't even have time to slap her. Luo Qingtong, who was bent over and looked like she was lying on Yan Yuejue's lap, had a sharp look in her eyes. She hadn't even caused trouble for Yuan Shui and this woman had already come knocking on her door. She wanted to slap her? Seeing Yuan Shui's slap, Luo Qingtong suddenly sneered. She pressed down on the purple invitation card under Yan Yuejue's ribs, warning her not to meddle in other people's business. She quickly raised her other hand. Slap. Luo Qingtong's palm blocked in midair and pushed aside Yuan Shui's hand. Then she slapped Yuan Shui's face. Not only that, Luo Qingtong raised her leg and kicked Yuan Shui in the stomach, sending her flying. Bang! Yuan Shui didn't even have time to react before she was sent flying by Luo Qingtong's kick. Ah! She fell to the ground and curled up like a shrimp. She was in so much pain that her face was contorted. You actually dared to hit me?" Yuan Shui looked at Luo Qingtong in disbelief. She actually dared to hit her. She actually dared to hit her. Yuan Shui had always been domineering in Tianyu Imperial City. She was the only daughter of Tianyu Empress and Yuan Ma's younger sister. She had always been the one to hit others. No one had ever hit her. But now she was being hit. And it was a slut who seduced the man she liked. Brother Zhu. She lay on the ground and looked at Yan Yuejue in the carriage with teary eyes. She hoped that he could speak up for her and teach the person who dared to hit her a lesson. However, Yan Yuejue only glanced at her indifferently. Luo Qingtong wiped her hands and looked at her. "Seventh princess, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't lift someone else's curtains. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as hitting you next time." If this wasn't the wrong place and the wrong time, she would have killed Yuan Shui long ago. Yuan Shui's eyes were filled with hatred. She lay on the ground with pain and humiliation in her heart. As a pampered princess, when had she ever been treated like this? However, she didn't even have a chance to act up. Yan Yuejue was protecting this woman. This realization made Yuan Shui's lips to bleed. With her here, she couldn't do anything to this audacious woman. She was clearly the most pampered princess of Tianyu's empire. Now this woman had hit him and he couldn't do anything to her. Yuan Shui's heart's heart. "Brother Zhu." She called out pitifully again. However, there wasn't any sound to sientes to the end. She she's bts as still have self-respect twos. She's to this to was as hers on the carriage. Seeing Yuan Shui run away crying, Yan Yuju's expression was indifferent. She looked at Luo Qingtong beside her. Oh. She wanted to hit, so she hit. What, do you want to stand up for her? Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows at her. She didn't say anything just now. Wasn't it too late to stand up now? But if the other party really opened her mouth, Luo Qingtong felt that it was necessary for her to return home. She never helped her enemies. Even if the other party only spoke up for Wuxia. But, if she wasn't happy, who could do anything to her? Chapter 432. I don't know her well. Yan Yuejue cut off his relationship with Wuxia with one sentence. He'd left home at a young age and barely knew Wuxia. How could he stand out for her? He just felt that with her status, there was no need to bicker with Wuxia. After all, she was an honored guest of the house of Yan Yuejue. But since she liked it, then so be it. Is that so? That's for the best. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a meaningful smile. I have a grudge with Tianyu's imperial family. It's best if your house of Yan Yuejue doesn't get involved. Given the grudge between the Luo family and Tianyu's imperial family, as well as the fact that Tianyu's imperial family wouldn't break off the engagement no matter what, she and Tianyu's imperial family would have to fight sooner or later. Since she'd already destroyed the Fei family, Luo Qingtong didn't mind spending a bit more time to destroy Tianyu's imperial family. Hearing the coldness in her words, Yan Yuejue glanced at her and nodded. House of Yan Yuejue won't interfere in this matter. Since she was an honored guest of the house of Yan Yuejue, they naturally sided with Luo Qingtong. Tianyu's imperial family was nothing to him. Even if the empire suddenly turned upside down, it had nothing to do with house of Yan Yuejue. Very good. Luo Qingtong looked at him and smiled. She looked the man up and down and said, since you just made a promise, I can give you some advice. There's a problem with the sword art you're cultivating. Although it has miraculous effects on sword intent, the drawbacks are too obvious. As she spoke, she narrowed her eyes and said, if I'm not wrong, what you're cultivating should be the only copy of a sword technique. Although it's powerful, it's incomplete. As she spoke, she met the man's sharp gaze and smiled leisurely. Don't look at me like that. Even if I investigated you in advance, who else would know about such a secret except for you? Luo Qingtong leaned against the wall of the carriage. I'm saying this because I can see the hidden danger in your body. As Luo Qingtong spoke, her gaze lingered on the man. At this time, Yan Yuju had already put on her outer robe again. The young master, who was as light as jade, had a body full of sharp and unhindered sword qi. Her posture was tall and straight like jade and bamboo. His aura had almost completely merged with the sword qi. He was only one step away from being able to completely restrain himself. At that time, his sword Dao would reach the great accomplishment stage, and his sword will would be able to transform into a physical entity, truly entering the realm of man and sword as one. If you don't want your sword Dao to remain stagnant after mastering it, you should avoid the 4 left and 3 right spots below your ribs when you fuse your sword qi and sword intent. Instead, you should go to the front 8 and the left 7. Luo Qingtong said. She leaned against the wall of the carriage and closed her eyes to rest. She had already said what she needed to say. It was up to him whether he listened or not. She was not some kind of compassionate saint who would cry and shout for help when she saw a problem with a person's cultivation method. If Yan Yuju hadn't made a promise on behalf of the Yanyu aristocratic family that they wouldn't care about the Tianyu imperial family, she wouldn't have mentioned this to him. I'll remember Mrs. Words. In the carriage, Yan Yuju's voice slowly sounded. It was very cautious. Other than him, no one knew the origin of his sword art. Luo Qingtong easily pointed out the drawbacks. He had no choice but to believe it. Chapter 433. The carriage swayed as it sped into the Lanyue family residence. The gatekeeper recognized that this was the young master's carriage and hurriedly went in to call someone out to greet them, but he was stopped by Lanyue. I'll give you an hour. Luo Qingtong looked at him. I'll leave in an hour. You can make the arrangements yourselves. Luo Qingtong had taken a great risk in coming to the Lanyue family residence. If it weren't for the promise she made at 9 Shaman Mountain and that little boy wasn't annoying, she wouldn't have made this trip. Therefore, she absolutely wouldn't stay here for long. Half an hour was already her bottom line. Lanyue nodded and immediately went to make the arrangements without saying anything. He had just returned to the Lanyue family residence and didn't know what had happened. It wasn't until he found Lanyue that he learned the ins and outs of the matter. In other words, she cured little cousin and relieved the poison in his body? He looked at the old man. Yes. Lanyue said with a solemn expression, it's not just relieved. Little Lucky's poison is almost completely cured. Although the poison still remains in his body, it has no effect on him. He can even practice martial arts now. It's just that the isolation of the poison requires us to continuously inject power into it to maintain it. That's why I invited this evil doctor with the highest form of visiting card. Lan Yuezhu said, you also know how complicated and difficult the poison in Little Lucky's body is. After so many years we've almost given up. Even the medical expert that your master invited said that his poison could be cured but not without damaging the foundation. But now there's no problem with Little Lucky's body. This evil doctor's medical skills are unfathomable. Moreover, she's also an alchemist. Speaking of this, Lan Yuezhu was incomparably glad that he had made a prompt decision at that time. If he hadn't sent a purple-level visiting card to Luo Qingtong early, she might not have come to their Lanyue family residence. After all, the current evil doctor was a hot commodity in the entire True Spill continent. A newly born alchemist. And she wasn't an old monster with years of experience. Who knew how many great families and powers wanted to befriend her? It was their fortune that the Lanyue family was able to invite him. Yen Yeye nodded, thinking of the advice the other party had given her on the carriage. His medical skills were truly unfathomable. Then grandfather quickly arranged for her to meet with Little Lucky. Yen Yuju told him about Luo Qingtong's matter. When he heard that Luo Qingtong had to hide from her enemies, that she couldn't show herself openly, and that she would leave in an hour, Master Lanyue's jaw almost dropped. Enemies? Are you kidding me? With his background in the Black Field and his current reputation, how could anyone find trouble with the evil doctor? Old Master Lanyue was well informed. He knew that after evil Dr. Gui Tong destroyed the Fei clan, other than himself, Blackfield had also issued a warning to the Tianyu royal family, telling them not to touch evil Dr. Gui Tong. The wording was extremely harsh and it was said that it came from the main city. With such protection, there was actually someone who could force the evil physician to hide everywhere. Could it be that it was related to that? That's right, the evil doctor's ability was so outstanding. It was likely that the people above had appeared in front of them for some reason, right? Thinking of this, Master Lanyue felt a chill in his heart. He hurriedly made sure that no information about the evil doctor was leaked. Otherwise, even their Lanyue family residence wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Luo Qingtong didn't know that Master Lanyue's imagination had already gone to the ends of the earth. She was currently in Yen Yuju's room, flipping through the books that Yen Yuju gave her to pass the time. Chapter 434. Oh. Luo Qingtong looked at the handwritten book that was sandwiched between the pile of books. When her eyes swept over it, she suddenly froze. This is... Luo Qingtong picked out the handwritten book from the pile. Inscription pattern explanation? Luo Qingtong looked at the handwritten book. The handwriting was very clear. Especially the word, inscription. This was a book that talked about inscription patterns. Luo Qingtong's eyes instantly lit up. It wasn't that she didn't ask Yen Yang and the others to help her collect inscription pattern books. But inscription patterns were incomparably profound. In the True Spill continent, there were no records related to inscription patterns. Even inscription pattern engraved tools were very rare. Thinking about it, in the True Spill continent where even refining pills was highly revered, the inscription technique was likely in extinct existence. Even inscription tools were extremely rare. Besides Luo Qingtong's life and death yin yang sword, Luo Qingtong had only heard about inscription tools from Yi Qianxian. Before she came to the Sky Universe branch, she had already contacted Yen Yang and the others through a special method. She had asked them to help her collect inscription tools in the Black Field. She had expressed her willingness to use the opportunity to help her refine pills in exchange. However, until now there was still no news. With the Blackfield's ability to spread news in addition to her great reputation, if there really was someone who had an inscription tool, there would be someone who would be willing to take it out and give it a try. But in these past few days there was no news at all. If it wasn't that there were no inscription tools here, then it was that they were very rare. They were so rare that they only existed in the hands of old monsters and superpowers. But the other party didn't have any intention of taking it out to exchange. Luo Qingtong frowned. She was prepared to change the condition to a rental if she still couldn't get an inscription tool. But then she found the inscription pattern explanation here. Although the content was a little messy, it made people feel a little confused. But Luo Qingtong could see that the other party was seriously studying inscription patterns. In the True Spill continent there was someone who was studying inscription patterns. And from the looks of it he had already figured out something. Luo Qingtong looked at the book of inscriptions. What was written on it was some of the other party's views on inscription patterns. It was similar to reading notes. There were more personal thoughts and opinions, but less about inscription patterns. But since there were such notes, it meant that the other party must have a lot of knowledge about inscriptions. Even if it was the most superficial, it would be fine. What Luo Qingtong lacked the most now was entry level. As long as she could learn the basics with her ability, there would be no more obstacles on the path of inscription. Luo Qingtong thought and put the handwritten copy aside. He was prepared to ask Yan Yuju after this matter was over, hoping to find the owner of this handwritten copy. Right at this moment, Fairy Sister. A figure rushed in from outside the door and threw himself into Luo Qingtong's arms. Luo Qingtong didn't know what was going on, but she was embraced by someone. This child was still so passionate and unguarded. But before he threw himself at her, shouldn't he look at her face first? Did he throw himself at the wrong person? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Young master, you've got the wrong person. This little guy had seen her face. Luo Qingtong didn't intend to reveal her identity. I am evil Dr. Ghost Eye, not some fairy sister. Luo Qingtong didn't want to complain about this title. Little fairy or whatever. This kind of description was really too far away from her. Chapter 435. That's impossible. The little Shota looked up at her. Fairy sister, I recognize you. As he spoke, his eyes flickered as if he was asking for praise. Fairy sister, you're playing hide and seek with me, right? As he spoke, he raised an incomparably cute smile. Fairy sister, you can't hide from me. Let me tell you a secret. Since young she has a special ability to recognize people. No matter how Fairy sister changes her appearance, I'll be able to recognize you immediately. These words were whispered in Luo Qingtong's ear. Damn. Luo Qingtong looked at Yan Yuju, who had already walked to the door and was about to enter. She immediately raised her hand and struck out, closing the door in an instant. You said that no matter what I change into, you'll be able to recognize me? Luo Qingtong looked at the little boy in front of her seriously. The latter still looked the same as when he was in Nine Magi Mountain, but he looked a lot more cheerful. At this moment, when he met Luo Qingtong's serious gaze, the little boy was clearly a little nervous. Then he bit his lip and nodded. Fairy sister, did I do something wrong? The little boy was very uneasy. He had just seen Luo Qingtong's expression change. Could it be that Fairy sister didn't want to recognize him? But he had always missed Fairy sister. Even in his dreams he wanted to find Fairy sister. Only by staying by her side could he find an unprecedented sense of security. The little boy already knew that the poison in his body was cured. Not only the python poison in Nine Magi Mountain, but the poison that had been tormenting him for a long time was also cured. He could practice martial arts and no longer need to be called a good-for-nothing by others. No one could be respectful to him in front of others, but call him a good-for-nothing behind his back. The little boy knew that all of this was brought about by Luo Qingtong. She had even disregarded the danger and came to cure him. She had just heard from his grandfather that the evil Dr. Gui Tong had avoided his enemies and came to cure him of the poison. He had told him not to reveal her identity outside. The little boy silently remembered these words in his heart and swore that he would not let Fairy sister encounter any danger. Just now, Fairy sister's expression changed so much. Was it because he called out her identity? With that thought in mind, the little fellow said seriously, Fairy sister, don't worry. I didn't tell Grandpa and the others about your identity. They don't know that you are Fairy sister. The little boy was well aware of his situation. He knew how many people wanted him dead. Because he didn't want to be a burden to Luo Qingtong, he kept his mouth shut about Luo Qingtong ever since he came back. If he hadn't seen Luo Qingtong and been too excited, he wouldn't have suddenly called out her name. I'm fine. Luo Qingtong looked at the pure and lovely little boy in front of her, and her face was indescribably tangled. She didn't care that the little Shota had exposed her identity. So what if others knew that the evil Dr. Ghost Eye was the fairy sister who had saved him? It wasn't like Xianxia hadn't seen her real appearance before. What really made Luo Qingtong's expression change was the little boy's ability to recognize her at a glance no matter what she looked like. In this way, her identity as Luo Qingtong could no longer be hidden. Thinking about how the other party could recognize her at a glance and call out her identity when she was Luo Qingtong frowned. Chapter 436. Xiaoxi, there's something I want to tell you. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she activated the Qiongqi's 100 transformations and returned to her original appearance. When you see me like this, you can't let others know that I'm the evil Dr. Ghost Eye, understand? The little boy nodded obediently. He vaguely sensed that Luo Qingtong was doing this because of the enemy his grandfather had mentioned. Fairy sister, don't worry. He nodded seriously and said, I won't let others know that you're the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. When we're in public, I'll take care to keep a distance from this identity of yours. The little boy's senses were very sharp. He could sense that Luo Qingtong wanted him to keep it a secret only because of this identity. Other times it didn't matter. Good boy, Xiaoxi. Luo Qingtong indeed meant this. She didn't expect the little boy to understand so quickly. It seemed that he was a child from a large family. Although his mind was pure and kind, he still had quite a bit of intelligence. In fact, Luo Qingtong had many methods to prevent the little boy from revealing her identity to prevent future trouble. But looking at the young man's eyes that were filled with pure trust in her, she couldn't bring herself to use those methods. Especially since the other party had been hiding her identity as fairy sister ever since they returned from Nine Magi Mountain. Luo Qingtong felt that she should be able to trust this little boy. Receiving Luo Qingtong's praise, the little boy was very happy and looked at Luo Qingtong with a gaze full of admiration. Fairy sister, your eyes are fine. They're especially beautiful. He looked at Luo Qingtong's eyes and said happily, Is that so? Thank you. Xiaoxi's body is also very good. Luo Qingtong didn't need to take the little boy's pulse to see that the aura in his body was very strong. Come here, I'll completely detoxify you. It could be seen that the people of the Lanyue family loved Xiaoxi very much. Luo Qingtong found a large amount of thick aura in his body, which wrapped and isolated the toxins very well. Clearly, the people of the Lanyue aristocratic family would inject little Lucky with their aura every day to ensure that his poison would not spread. If he didn't truly love her, he wouldn't have done it so meticulously. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and injected her aura into the little boy's body. Bear with it, she said to the little fellow lying on the bed. The latter had already taken off his clothes and was biting a small wooden stick in his mouth. When he heard Luo Qingtong's words, he nodded heavily. The little fellow knew that as long as the poison in his body was completely removed, he would be able to get rid of his previous life. He could do it. Immortal sister, just do it. I'm not afraid of pain. Every time the toxins in his body were touched by someone, he would feel so much pain that he would rather die than live. The little boy was already used to it. When Luo Qingtong heard this, she recalled how the little fellow had blocked the giant python's bite for her on the Nine Magi Mountains. He hadn't even cried out in pain. The little young master who grew up in an extravagant family had such a high tolerance for pain. It wasn't because he was strong enough, but because he had suffered too much. The person who had poisoned him was too vicious. Luo Qingtong's eyes turned cold and she began to guide the toxins to seep out of his body. With her eye technique, Luo Qingtong effortlessly forced the poison out of the little fellow's body. Chapter 437. Demonic Doctor. Seeing her come out, Master Yanyu stood up with a whoosh. In the hall outside there was only him, Yanyu Ju, and one or two trusted aides. It was extremely secretive. Demonic Doctor, how is my grandson? Master Yanyu asked impatiently. He's fine. The poison has been forced out. There won't be any problems in the future, Luo Qingtong said, looking at him and taking out the handwritten copy she had seen before. Old Master Lanyue, I would like to ask, where did you get this handwritten copy? Handwritten copy? Master Yanyu was very happy now. He followed Luo Qingtong's hand and looked at the handwritten copy in her hand with an indescribable puzzlement. What handwritten copy? What is this? I just found this when I was flipping through the books in my room. I thought it was quite interesting, so I wanted to ask, Luo Qingtong said lightly. I don't know if Master knows who wrote this handwritten copy? A handwritten copy found in the room? Master Yanyu was puzzled. He asked Luo Qingtong where the handwritten copy was placed and where it was mixed with the other books. Then with an ah, he raised his hand and slapped his head. Look at me. How could I forget this? He said to Luo Qingtong, Demonic Doctor, please don't blame me. I just didn't remember. This handwritten copy belongs to an old friend of mine. I think I accidentally brought this handwritten copy when I asked to borrow books from him. He hurriedly said to his trusted aide, Quick, go to Master Shu's house and ask him about the origin of this handwritten copy. That trusted aide deftly responded and quickly left. Luo Qingtong saw that there was still an hour left, so she wasn't in a hurry to leave. She just waited here for the results. That trusted aide of the Yanyu family was very fast. Luo Qingtong only waited for half a quarter of an hour before the other party ran back, panting. Reporting to clan head, Elder Shu said that this is a handwritten copy written by a teacher from the Tianyu Academy called Song Cheng. He's an instructor of the Tianyu Branch Academy, and he's known as a lunatic in the Tianyu Branch Academy. Rumor has it that he's so obsessed with his research that he's gone mad every day. The confidant told him all the information he had gathered, no matter how big or small. It was especially detailed regarding Song Cheng. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes as she spoke. Song City. What a coincidence, the other party was actually an instructor from the Tianyu Branch Academy. This saved her a lot of trouble. After getting the answer she wanted, Luo Qingtong no longer stayed in the Lanyue family. She directly boarded the carriage with Yan Yuju. The latter sent her off like how he came, and only put her down when they were near the inn that Luo Qingtong rented. Miss, take care of yourself. Yan Yuju looked at the delicate and pretty young girl in front of him. He bowed slightly and handed over a jade pendant from his waist. Miss, you've done a great favor for my Yanyu family this time. Please accept this jade pendant. If there's anything you need in the future, I'll definitely do my best to help you. His eyes drooped slightly and his eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. His entire person was like the reflection of a clear swan, a green bamboo reflecting the moon, indescribably light as jade. Luo Qingtong looked at the jade pendant he handed over, thought for a moment and raised her hand to take it. All right, then I'll accept deferentially. The Yanyu family was quite powerful and the man in front of her was also very talented. She didn't know when this jade pendant would come in handy. Since that was the case, why not accept it? Chapter 438. Oh my God. Little Pig stood in front of the windowsill and covered his eyes with his two hooves. He couldn't bear to see the scene below. This woman is courting death. Not only did she come back after going out for so long, she even came back with a man. They even sat in the same carriage and were talking and laughing with each other. She even accepted something from him. Oh my God. Little Pig's hind legs trembled when he sensed the oppressive aura from the man beside him. He didn't even dare to look at Xianxia's face. Even an idiot would know that his face was as dark as ink. Oh my God. This man better not take out his anger on me this time. I'm really innocent. Just as Little Pig's heart was trembling, the door to the room was opened. I'm back. Luo Qingtong smiled like a blooming flower. However, she was met with silence in the room. Little Pig looked at Yi Qianren, whose face was dark and whose aura was incomparably gloomy. His legs trembled violently. In the next second, it let out a howl and scurried out of the room with its four hooves. Oh. I have something to do outside. You guys talk. You guys talk. His movements were so fast that he ran out of the room before Luo Qingtong could react. Strange, it's already so late. Why did he go out? Luo Qingtong looked at the sky. It was already dark. She had wasted a lot of time at the Lanyue residence, so it was already late for her to come back. However, it was difficult to be discovered in the evening. Luo Qingtong had waited outside the Lanyue residence for so long just to wait for the sky to turn dark. Heh. She knows it's late? Xianxia looked at her coldly. Where did you go? He asked expressionlessly. The aura around him had already frozen to the point where it was hard to restrain. This woman actually went on a date with another man. I went to the Lanyue residence. Luo Qingtong was baffled. She blinked and felt that Yi Qianxian's words were a little strange. This tone, why did it sound like he was extorting a confession? Could it be that the Black Field and the Falling Moon aristocratic family had some private conflicts? As she was thinking, she walked to little Ming Zun, who was on the windowsill, and bent down to pick him up. "Alright, don't be angry. I'm there to detoxify people. It's not like you don't know." This man had set up an inescapable net around the Lanyue family just to catch her. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong smiled. Could it be that he was unhappy to see her return safe and sound? Her eyes curved into crescents and she immediately gave Yi Qianxian a reason to be in a bad mood. "Are you disappointed to see me return safely?" As she spoke, she pinched the tender flesh on his cheeks. "Unfortunately, I won't give you the chance to catch me." As she spoke, she kissed little Ming Zun's lips, then licked her lips and said, "Be good." He would obediently stay by her side and wait for her to grow up before he counterattacked. At that time, even if his real body came, she wouldn't be afraid. As she thought of this, Luo Qingtong smiled even more happily. Yi Qianxian looked at her with a cold expression. For some reason, the anger in his heart slowly dissipated. This woman was so heartless. If he couldn't even move her, how could others? Even so, he was still very unhappy with the man who came back with her. Whoosh. When Luo Qingtong wasn't paying attention, Yi Qianxian's figure suddenly became much thinner. Chapter 439. Boom. Yan Yuju's carriage had already gone far away. In the carriage, the man's figure was handsome and tall, as straight as a bamboo. Yan Yuju closed his eyes to rest, and the words that Luo Qingtong pointed out the flaws in his body's sword cultivation kept echoing in his mind. He tried to adjust the circulation route of the sword qi in his body. At this moment, with a boom, a warning sign appeared in his heart, and an extremely strong sense of danger suddenly descended. In the next second, countless sword qi suddenly burst out from his body and enveloped him in it. Boom! In the instant that he moved, the carriage that he was sitting in suddenly exploded into countless pieces under a powerful attack. The incomparably fierce sword qi suddenly rushed out from the exploded carriage, forming a huge sword mass in midair. Yan Yuju's figure appeared from it, and his sharp eyes swept around. "Young master." The guard who was driving the carriage, who was protected by him at the critical moment, was still in a state of shock, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "I'm fine." Yan Yuju retracted his gaze. There were no attackers in the surroundings. Strange. Looking at the carriage that was blown to pieces, his eyes narrowed slightly. In the next second, the sword light around him gathered together, and he disappeared in midair together with the guard who was driving the carriage. At the same time, in the inn, Luo Qingtong still wanted to tease little Ming Zun. As soon as she lowered her head, she found that his body had become much thinner, and she was instantly shocked. "What's wrong with you? What's going on? Your soul power has decreased so much." Luo Qingtong saw that he had shrunk in her arms and she was instantly anxious. What was this guy doing? If this divided soul accidentally dissipated, it would also cause damage to his body. Otherwise, why would Luo Qingtong spend so much effort to replenish his soul power, and constantly check if he was in the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding wood? She was afraid that this divided soul of his would accidentally dissipate. At that time his body would also be injured. "Why are you always so worrisome? Did the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding would absorb your strength? Why didn't you say anything?" Luo Qingtong's brows furrowed. She quickly took out the Yin soul pills from her bosom and fed him one by one. Yi Qianxian's entire body was much weaker now that he had split out such a ball of soul power. His small face was slightly pale. Seeing Luo Qingtong hurriedly take out the Yin soul pill, his heart was very happy. This woman still cared about him. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and let Luo Qingtong feed him one pill after another with a cold face. "I'm fine." His voice was cold and his cheeks puffed up as he chewed. It was indescribably cute. "You're still fine? It's about to dissipate." Luo Qingtong frowned and looked at him. "What did you do? Why did it suddenly become like this?" "No." Little Nether Venerable turned his head coolly. F***ck. Luo Qingtong saw that he was determined not to say anything. She gritted her teeth and didn't continue to ask. She only checked her body and the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding wood from top to bottom. After finding that no power had been absorbed, she was immediately relieved. It was good that the heart of the 1,000-year soul guiding wood had absorbed it. She didn't know what this man did to dissipate so much soul power. Careful. If this divided soul dissipates, your body will also be injured. Chapter 440. Xianxia narrowed his eyes as he looked at her. Will you let the main body dissipate? Although this woman always made him so angry that he stomped his feet and tricked him in all sorts of ways, she had never hurt him. He believed in her. Otherwise he would have exploded his soul when he was imprisoned. How could he allow her to blaspheme him like this? Was he someone who could be kissed and hugged by anyone? Not even a wisp of his soul. Only this woman could do such a thing. Of course not, Luo Qingtong said without thinking. But there's always a chance. What if I didn't notice? She raised her hand and pinched his cheeks. Forget it. Fortunately nothing happened this time. You can keep this bottle of Soul pills. Luo Qingtong was still worried. She immediately took out a useless ring, strung it with a red string, and hung it around Yi Qianxian's neck. Okay, this is all Soul pills. Something like this happens again and I'm not around, you can immediately take it out and eat it. This way you'll be fine. Little pig who just happened to come back from outside. Oh my God. This woman doesn't know how cruel this man is. She actually gave him a bunch of Soul pills. It had clearly seen that the soul power that had suddenly disappeared was clearly directed at the man who had returned with her. This woman is still indulging him like this. Little pig couldn't bear to watch anymore. Yi Qianxian coldly glanced at it, warning it not to say a word. He lowered his head and looked at the useless ring hanging on his neck. His expression softened slightly. He nodded. For the next 2 days Luo Qingtong didn't leave her room. She looked through Song Cheng's information. She discovered that this person was really a strange person. He had been in Tianyu branch for decades and had never left. What gave Luo Qingtong a headache was that he had a strange temper and was very difficult to get close to. Most importantly, other than the necessary low-level classes, he didn't appear anywhere else. Moreover, he basically ignored everyone. Luo Qingtong frowned. How could she get information about the inscription pattern technique from such a person? Luo Qingtong looked at his profile and realized that he had suffered a lot of ridicule and teasing because of his research on inscription patterns. Therefore they were very vigilant when strangers approached them. It wouldn't be easy to get information about the inscription technique from such a person. It seems that we can only start from the side. Luo Qingtong looked at the information. A teacher of the lower classes, right? Then she would go to the lower class. Anyway, for Luo Qingtong, it didn't matter which class she went to. Even if this low-grade class was called the trash class in the Tianyu Branch Academy, it was still the same. For Luo Qingtong, no matter how good the tutor's teaching was, it might not be as good as her own dojutsu. As long as the tutor could explain the lesson clearly, it would be fine. As for the rest, it didn't matter. However, Luo Qingtong didn't know if she could get what she wanted. After all, she was the #1 student in Dongli country. If the people in Tianyu Branch Academy didn't agree to let her go to the lower class, then there was nothing she could do. At that time, should she stir up some trouble? For example, beating up a certain princess, Yu Wenxue. Then she should be able to enter the lower class easily, right? However, on the day of Tianyu Branch's registration, Luo Qingtong realized that she had thought too much. Chapter 441. At the entrance of Tianyu Branch Academy, Luo Qingtong stood with a group of people from Dongli country, waiting for the teacher to announce her name list. She met Chu Wenhao and the others on the way here. They were all from the eastern border country, so they naturally stood together. Chu Wenhao's name was given by Luo Qingtong, so he was very grateful to her. The group of people from Dongli country came together. Relying on his strength and the prestige of the Chu family, Chu Wenhao had become the leader of the group. His attitude toward Luo Qingtong influenced the group. At this moment, the group of people from Dongli country were eagerly waiting for their names to be announced. Qingtong, you will definitely be assigned to the elite class this time. Chu Wenhao looked at Luo Qingtong and said with a smile. The group of people came from the same place, so they quickly became familiar with each other. Chu Wenhao calmly called out Luo Qingtong's name, but he didn't know that in the latter's sleeve little pig was sweating for him. Young man, I respect you as a true hero. Fortunately, Although Yi Qianxian was prone to jealousy, he wasn't crazy enough to make a move on someone just because they called out Luo Qingtong's name. Looking at the seemingly cute but actually ferocious little doll sitting in the sleeve, Little Pig silently moved a little further away. Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong's name was called from outside. The teacher in charge of announcing the students' class assignments raised his voice and shouted. Dongli Country's top student assigned to the class. The instructor's voice suddenly stopped at this moment. What's going on? Looking at the class on the list, the teacher almost thought that he had seen wrongly. How could it be this? He carefully looked at it again and again. After confirming that he didn't see wrongly, he said in disbelief, "Low class." Wow. A commotion broke out in the surroundings. A top student was actually assigned to the low class. All of a sudden, the surrounding students who were waiting to register were in an uproar. Even those who did not pay attention to the situation here understood what was going on from the discussions of the people around them. Low class. That was the trash class. Most of the people who were sent in were not talented and were destined to have no achievements in the future. Otherwise, it would be those who had no talent at all and were just idling around in the Tianyu branch. In short, it was just a place to waste time. When the people of Tianyu Branch Academy mentioned the lower class, they all had an indifferent attitude. The people inside were trash at the bottom of the Tianyu Branch Academy. Because of their lack of talent, they were destined to have no achievements. The teaching of the lower classes was also the worst. The standards of the instructors inside might not even be as good as some of the genius students in the elite classes. Luo Qingtong, the top student of Dongli Country, was assigned to such a class? This must be a joke. If it was an ordinary student, everyone would have just listened to it. After all, it wasn't as if there hadn't been students with decent grades who were thrown into the trash class because they offended someone. Most of those people quickly quieted down after entering the trash class. From then on, he had no more achievements. However, this Luo Qingtong was the number one in Dongli Country. This was the first time that a top student was assigned to the trash class. What's more, Luo Qingtong was the fiancé of the empire's fifth prince. Everyone looked at this scene in disbelief. Their faces were filled with unspeakable astonishment. Could it be a mistake? With her grades and identity, she shouldn't be assigned to the trash class. Chapter 442. We don't accept this. Luo Qingtong is the top student in Dongli Kingdom. How can she be assigned to the lower class? This class allocation is unfair. Chu Wenhao was the one who spoke. He entered Tianyu Branch Academy with Luo Qingtong's recommendation letter and was assigned to the upper class. Now that she heard that Luo Qingtong was assigned to the lower class, she immediately shouted indignantly. How dare you? When Chu Wenhao's voice was heard, a cold voice was heard. Behind the teacher's seat, a young man dressed in blue silk suddenly looked coldly in Chu Wenhao's direction. Who are you to question the academy's decision? Luo Qingtong did defeat Luo Qingtong and became the top student in Dongli Kingdom. But according to what we know, Luo Xingning was wearing the Luo family's heirloom armor and her strength sword. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong defeated her easily. We have reason to suspect that she is not qualified to be the top student. Moreover, the young man looked at Chu Wenhao arrogantly and said, Luo Qingtong was too ruthless in the arena. She even dared to attack the invigilator. Considering all the above, it is not wrong to assign her to the lower class. If you don't accept this, then, he sneered, you don't have to enter Tianyu Branch Academy. Chu Wenhao looked at him and his face turned red. Who are you? This is the academy's decision. It is up to the teachers to decide. You don't have the right to decide. Humph. The top 10 students in the genius ranking can participate in the decision of class assignment. My words have the same effect as the teachers. When you enter the top 10 of the genius ranking, then you can question my qualifications. The young man looked arrogant. He looked at Chu Wenhao with disdain. John Haoping, I await your instructions. Wow. As soon as the young man finished speaking, the registration area was in an uproar. The top 10 students in the genius ranking are likely to enter the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin, right? Yes. It was said that at the end of the year, those who managed to secure a spot in the top 10 of the genius ranking would be recruited into the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin. The top 10 of the genius ranking are half the students of the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin. I didn't expect to see such a person at the registration today. These top 10 students on the genius ranking are so domineering. They actually have the same authority as the teachers. That's right. I've heard of this Zhou Xian. He's ranked 5th on the genius ranking. He has basically entered the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin. By the way, I heard that his instructor was old Chu, who was seriously injured a few days ago. Someone whispered, no wonder he wanted to find trouble with Luo Qingtong. I heard that when Elder Chu was invigilating the examination in Dongli country, he was angry because of Luo Qingtong's collision. In the end, he accidentally provoked a passerby and was seriously injured. When he was brought back, he was on his last breath. He almost couldn't be saved. Hearing these words, Luo Qingtong finally understood why Zhou Xian was targeting her. He was old Chu's disciple, Luo Xining's senior brother. No wonder he was so arrogant. Unfortunately, she was exactly what she wanted when she was assigned to the lower class. Luo Qingtong was still worried that she couldn't find a chance to enter the lower class openly. This Zhou Xian had helped her a lot. However, even if she wanted to enter the lower class, she couldn't let others set her up like this. Luo Qingtong looked coldly at the arrogant Zhou Xian. Chapter 443. Luo Qingtong attacked Luo Xining for a reason. Elder Chu was injured because he attacked Luo Qingtong first. How can you put her in the lower class because of this? It's not fair. Chu Wenhao argued. Junior brother, what you said is wrong. At this moment, a clear voice suddenly came from Zhou Xiaoping's side. A young girl wearing a jade moon flowing silk dress looked in Chu Wenhao's direction with an indifferent and graceful expression. Even if Elder Chu attacked first, it was because Luo Qingtong attacked first. Moreover, how can personal grudges be settled in the arena? The school's decision will not be wrong. You better leave. The girl's voice was like a bird's chirp. It was very pleasing to the ear. She was very dignified and dignified. The crowd looked at where she was sitting and suddenly there was an uproar. Another top 10 student on the genius list. I know this one. Shi Qingqing. The daughter of the right Prime Minister of the Tianyu Empire. 7th on the genius list. She is indeed the number 1 goddess of the Tianyu branch school. She is beautiful, elegant and powerful. She is really powerful. The discussion came in waves. Luo Qingtong fixed her eyes on Shi Qingqing. To others, Shi Qingqing's words might have sounded like she was speaking from an objective point of view. But Luo Qingtong heard the hostility in her words. She deliberately agreed with Zhou Xiaoping's words. Her purpose was to confirm that she was in the lower class. That was interesting. Zhou Xiaoping had a grudge against her because of Elder Chu. Why did Shi Qingqing do that? Luo Qingtong looked at Shi Qingqing. The latter was also quietly sizing her up. Luo Qingtong, the young lady of the Luo family of the Dongli state, the fiancée of the 5th prince. When she thought of the last 3 words, Shi Qingqing clenched her fists in her sleeves. A girl from an inferior marquis mansion had become the fiancée of the 5th prince. What did she do? And she even went to the Tianyu palace to break off the engagement. She dared to do this. Wasn't it because she was relying on the 5th prince's loyalty? How could such a woman be worthy of the 5th prince? If it was her, Shi Qingqing fiercely clenched her fists. Her facial expression was completely airtight. Junior sister Luo, as the fiancée of the 5th prince, we should let you go. But there is indeed a problem with your qualification. Elder Chu was seriously injured and we had no choice but to put you in the lower class. But she looked at Luo Qingtong and smiled. If there is no problem with your qualification, then you can return to the elite class. If there is no problem with your qualification, then you will be able to return to the elite class. If there is no problem. Shi Qingqing's words were reasonable. She even apologized to Luo Qingtong for being assigned to the lower class. But if you looked at her eyes carefully, you would find that her eyes were full of coldness and malice. No one had ever been able to rise again after being put into the trash class. Her words seemed to be flattering Luo Qingtong, but in fact she wanted to step on Luo Qingtong better in the future. As long as Luo Qingtong entered the trash class, she could guarantee that she would not have any chance to rise again. She would not let her rise again. Luo Qingtong could only wait to rot in the trash class. Shi Qingqing looked at Luo Qingtong with a smile, waiting for her to agree. Chapter 444. Oh. Is that so? So you're saying that Senior Shi and Senior Zhan's strength were also promoted from the trash class? Luo Qingtong looks at her indifferently. The sarcasm in her words is too strong, and Shi Qingqing has no way to answer. Naturally, her strength had risen step by step from the elite class. If she was in the trash class, she would have long been left in the dust. No matter how good her talent was, she still needed someone to teach her. Otherwise, what was the difference between her and being a waste? Of course, Shi Qingqing would never say this to Luo Qingtong. But if she said that she was promoted from the elite class, how could she convince Luo Qingtong to go to the lower class to gain experience? After all, she herself wouldn't go. This Luo Qingtong is really a bit difficult to deal with. Shi Qingqing looks at Luo Qingtong and the light in her eyes becomes colder. But the smile on her face doesn't change at all. Junior Luo must be joking. She looks at Luo Qingtong and smiles. Junior Luo's talent is extraordinary, and naturally different from people like us. After all, you're the fiancé of the 5th prince. When she says this, she slightly lowers her eyes, hiding the uncontrollable jealousy and hatred in her eyes. This kind of woman is actually the fiancé of the 5th prince, that kind of proud son of heaven. The jealousy and hatred in Shi Qingqing's heart can't be dispersed. She must trample Luo Qingtong to the bottom of the mud. She must let people know that this kind of trash is not worthy of the 5th prince. Luo Qingtong looks at her and smiles. Shi Qingqing thinks that she hid it very well. But the jealousy and hatred in her eyes, even if she lowers her eyes, can't be concealed. Luo Qingtong has a keen grasp of people's hearts. In front of her, Shi Qingqing's magnified malice is as bright as a firefly in the dark night. You Wenma's admirer? What a big rotten peach blossom. But since the other party wants to rot in front of her, how can she not help her? But her heart is really disgusted. Luo Qingtong was disgusted. She didn't want to have anything to do with Yu Wenma, let alone help him deal with this kind of rotten peach blossom. How troublesome. After the Tianyu branch, he would immediately deal with the Tianyu royal family. Her engagement with Yu Wenma must be annulled. If the royal family of Tianyu wanted to use force, they would have to see if she would give them a chance. Once the Luo clan's strength increased, she would make sure that Tianyu's royal family wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Luo Qingtong looked at Shi Qingqing and said, Senior Sister Shi is right. You and I are indeed different. As she spoke, she suddenly took a step forward and took the class allocation results that the instructor read out. I accept this result. Clear pupil. Hearing her words, Chu Wenhao and the others became anxious. No. You can't go to the lower class. The teaching was too bad. And these 2 people will definitely target you again. At that time, you won't be able to make a name for yourself. Chu Wenhao was anxious. He wasn't deceived by Shi Qingqing's words. The other party's words were clearly forcing Luo Qingtong to go to the lower class. As long as she had the ability, she could return to the elite class. As long as Luo Qingtong was different from others. This was clearly a provocation to raise Luo Qingtong so high that she had no way out. Clear pupil, you mustn't fall for their trick. It's okay. Luo Qingtong looked at him and smiled. A caterpillar can turn into a butterfly when it breaks out of its cocoon. A hidden dragon can rise above the 9 heavens when it enters the abyss. The lower class isn't as bad as you think. There's a saying that goes, humans can conquer nature. What's wrong with the trash class? Who said that the trash class couldn't produce geniuses? Chapter 445. When Luo Qingtong said this, the bloody light in her eyes flickered. In that clear reflection, the light in her eyes was so confident and dazzling. It was as if what she wanted to go to wasn't the lower class that everyone called trash class, but the peak that everyone couldn't even look up to. Chu Wenhao looked at her. The words that he wanted to say were suddenly unable to come out. He suddenly had a strong premonition in his heart. That is, this girl can definitely do it. She will break the curse of the lower class being trash class, and walk towards her own glory. She will create another legend that belongs to her, far surpassing the legend created by Yu Wenma. At this time, Chu Wenhao's vision wasn't big enough. His eyes could only see the Tianyu Empire's small area. But he didn't know that Luo Qingtong's future achievements were simply beyond his imagination. And he and the Chu family, who had been following her closely, also received huge benefits. From then on, they broke through the peak, reaching a level that they didn't even dare to think about. Okay. He looked at Luo Qingtong, nodded, scratched his head and said, "If it really doesn't work, I'll come and teach you after listening to the teacher's lecture." Chu Wenhao was still a bit uneasy. In his view, the lower class teaching might not be as good as his own teaching. He really couldn't be blamed for thinking this way, but the reputation of the lower class being trash class was too widespread. No one had ever been able to make a name for themselves after entering the trash class. No need. Luo Qingtong listened to his words and laughed. To be honest, her recommendation to Chu Wenhao was not a loss at all. At least he didn't alienate her because she entered the trash class, but instead helped her find a way. But Luo Qingtong had the eye technique, so for her, entering the lower class or the elite class didn't make any difference. But Chu Wenhao, although he entered the upper class, the competition inside was fierce. If he really did what he said, it wouldn't be long before he was kicked out of the upper class. The gains really didn't make up for the losses, and it was completely unnecessary. You study hard, and later when you enter the elite class you will have the right to speak. I'm still waiting for you to back me up. As soon as Luo Qingtong said this, Chu Wenhao instantly felt that he had a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. That's right, Luo Qingtong was assigned to the lower class. Wasn't it because of Zhang Haoping and Shi Qingqing's strength in the Tianyu branch? The top 10 students of the genius list had special privileges. If he became more powerful, he could help Luo Qingtong. Thinking like this, Chu Wenhao's heart's heart and his attention was also diverted. However, Shi Qingqing sneered in her heart when she heard the conversation between Luo Qingtong and Chu Wenhao. Was it so easy to enter the top 10 of the genius list? How many high-class, middle-class and low-class countries were there under the Tianyu Empire? There were so many students as to the people. Tianyu Tiu, as Luo to the top 10. Shi Qingqing smirked. Luo Qingtong was daydreaming. But the disdain in her heart didn't show on her face. Instead, she gently and generously said, "That's right, if you enter the top 10 of the genius list, you will have the right to speak in the Tianyu branch. Of course, it's the same for Junior Luo. I believe that even if you're in the lower class, you can still stand out and enter the top 10 of the genius list." Shi Qingqing's face was smiling, but her heart was full of malice. Entering the trash class, Luo Qingtong wouldn't even be able to enter the top 100 of the school in the future, let alone the top 10. Shi Qingqing's words were not so much to encourage Luo Qingtong, but to ruthlessly trample on her. Chapter 446. Junior Sister Qing is too good at comforting people. Entering the trash class means they're trash. Just based on them, they want to enter the top 10 of the genius list? Dream on. He sneered and got up. Okay, the show is over. I still have a duel with a junior brother, so I won't stay here and waste my time. As he spoke, he glanced at Luo Qingtong with a cold smile and strode away. That arrogant appearance simply angered Chu Wenhao to the point of exploding. Damn, who do you think you are? Chu Wenhao looked at the direction Zhang Haoping left with a burst of anger. Isn't it just the top 10 of the genius list? What's there to be arrogant about? I will definitely surpass him in the future. Good, you have ambition. I have faith in you, good luck. Luo Qingtong patted his shoulder and looked in the direction Zhang Haoping left. No one knew that just now her 5 fingers moved slightly. A faintly discernible force had already shot out and entered Zhang Haoping's body. The latter was unaware and directly left. Junior Sister Luo, don't blame senior brother Zhang. Shi Qingqing looked at Luo Qingtong and smiled. He's just a bit impulsive and straightforward, he didn't mean to offend you. Impulsive and straightforward? So it was true that she was trash? It was just that she said it at an inappropriate time? He was really very straightforward. Luo Qingtong looked at the fake smile on Shi Qingqing's face and laughed softly. Of course, I won't bicker with senior brother Zhang. She just wanted to take revenge. These two people didn't think that things would be over just because they set her up like this, right? Although she took the initiative to jump into the pit, it didn't mean that she would let the other party set her up and not fight back. Luo Qingtong looked at Shi Qingqing with a smile. The latter looked at the brilliant smile on her face and inexplicably felt uncomfortable. They were clearly the ones who set up Luo Qingtong, so why didn't the other party feel angry? Instead it seemed like they had helped her a lot. Shi Qingqing frowned and the uncomfortable feeling in her heart became more serious. She had actually made other preparations. He was just waiting for Luo Qingtong to refuse to accept the results of the class assignment and make trouble in public. This way she could openly make a move against Luo Qingtong and use this opportunity to kick her out of the Tianyu Branch Academy, trampling her to the bottom of the mud. However, Luo Qingtong didn't do what she expected. This made Shi Qingqing quite depressed. It was as if you had prepared a big move and were waiting to knock your opponent down, but in the end your opponent didn't even take your move. Shi Qingqing frowned. If Luo Qingtong wasn't angry, then her following arrangements wouldn't be needed. But it didn't matter. In any case, he was already in the lower class. She would never be able to make a name for herself there. If he wanted to deal with her, there would be plenty of opportunities. Thinking of this, Shi Qingqing's heart immediately felt comfortable. It's good that junior sister Luo doesn't mind. She stood up gracefully and said, I still have some things to do, so I won't stay here any longer. Juniors, I'll take my leave now. Shi Qingqing's words caused a sound of pity to come from all around. It was rare to see the goddess of the Tianyu Branch Academy come out, but they didn't expect the other party to leave so soon. Everyone felt that it was a pity and rushed to talk to Shi Qingqing. Seeing Shi Qingqing being surrounded by people, Luo Qingtong smiled wickedly. Senior sister Shi, take care. You must take care. Otherwise, how could you watch a good show? Shi Qingqing very much enjoyed the feeling of being surrounded by people, worshipped and sought after. She carried the demeanor of a goddess and greeted the many new students as she slowly left. Suddenly, Chapter 447. A scream could be heard all of a sudden. A freshman who had gathered in front of Shi Qingqing was looking at her in horror. Senior Shi, your face. He raised his hand and pointed at her face. The latter didn't understand and was about to ask when she suddenly felt an itch on her face. She immediately raised her hand to scratch it. With this grab, the new student instantly fell backwards onto the ground and scrambled to run away. As he ran, he cried out in horror, Monster! Even though he knew that the person opposite him was a goddess, Shi Qingqing, and not some demon or ghost, the visual impact of an extremely beautiful person turning into an extremely ugly person was too strong. This freshman simply couldn't withstand this shock and was so scared that he wet his pants on the spot. Following his voice, everyone's gaze also turned towards Shi Qingqing. The moment they saw it, everyone's faces instantly turned into a palette of colors. It was extremely colorful. Needless to say, it was extremely exciting. What appeared in their line of sight was a terrifying woman whose entire body was covered with blisters. Her face and body were filled with huge blisters one after another, and she looked like a toad. Especially that face, which was filled with huge red bumps one after another, made her look like a pig's head that had been stung by a hornet. However, Shi Qingqing was completely unaware of it. When everyone looked over, she even smiled at them. With this smile, everyone instantly knew why that freshman screamed so tragically just now. Can you imagine the feeling of a huge pig's head or a toad smiling at you? Especially when the other party was so charming just now and had the posture of a goddess. There would be no harm if there was no comparison. Everyone looked at the ugly pig's head opposite them, but still had to act like a peerless beauty monster. Instantly, their stomachs churned and the expression on their faces couldn't tell if they were more frightened or disgusted. Blurg. Someone couldn't help but vomit. At this moment, even if Shi Qingqing didn't feel anything, she could tell from everyone's frightened and disgusted gazes that it was because of her. What's wrong? She raised her hand to touch her face. Is there something on her face? However, just as she raised her hand, she realized that there were huge blisters on her arm. Instantly, Shi Qingqing almost fainted from the shock of that terrifying scene. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something and frantically touched her face. With this touch, he instantly felt a bunch of big bumps. Ah! In an instant, Shi Qingqing screamed. She looked at all the people who were looking at her in horror or disgust and ran away screaming. On the first day of school, Shi Qingqing's reputation as the goddess of Tianyu was completely destroyed. In the future, even if she regained her original appearance, when others saw her face, the the first thing that came to their minds would still be this toad-like face full of red bumps. It was fine if he wasn't disgusted to the point of vomiting, but how could he go against his conscience and call her a goddess? From today onwards, most people would probably take a detour when they saw her so as not to recall today's terrible experience. As for Xianxia, other than her strength that was ranked in the top 10 of the genius ranking, there was nothing else that could be related to the title of a goddess. Ah! Xianxia screamed and ran away. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. Chapter 448. Oh my god. That's so scary. How did senior sister Xian become like this? Looks like she's been contaminated by something dirty or poisoned. Everyone guessed. The instructors came back to their senses and hurriedly asked the pharmacists to check on Xianxia. They still cared about this genius student who was likely to enter the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin in the end-of-year examination. They didn't want anything to happen to her. However, the news of Xianxia's disfigurement and transformation into a giant toad also spread widely in Tianyu Branch Academy. The girls in the elite class who were suppressed by Xianxia's reputation were very happy to spread the news and let more people know about it. They wanted to let everyone know about Xianxia's embarrassing incident. While Xianxia was in trouble, Zhang Haoping and a junior from the advanced class were standing on the battle platform of Tianyu Branch Academy. They were preparing for a practical battle. Below the battle platform was a group of students who had come to watch and learn. As one of the top 10 students on the genius ranking, Zhang Haoping rarely challenged anyone to a battle. However, the young man in front of him was the son of an old friend of his teacher. Zhang Haoping naturally had to treat him better. He was the one who had suggested this duel of mentorship. After the instructional battle was announced, many people instantly received the news and rushed over wanting to witness the battle. Most of them were students from the elite and advanced classes. Those of a lower level would not even be qualified to enter the battle arena. Come on, Junior. You don't need to hold back. Go all out and show me your strength. In the battle platform, Zhang Haoping crossed his arms and looked at the young man in front of him indifferently. The latter was so excited that his face turned red. He hurriedly nodded and said, "Okay. Senior, I'll do my best. Please enlighten me, Senior." As he said that, he got into a fighting stance. Zhang Haoping just nodded at him indifferently. Let's begin. He looked very proud. As a genius student who ranked 5th on the genius ranking, he had the right to be proud. The people around him didn't think there was anything wrong with his arrogance. The bigger fist was the truth. This was the same everywhere. Senior brother, be careful. As the youth spoke, he moved with a swoosh. Boom. He waved his fist and instantly attacked Zhang Haoping. Zhang Haoping's posture was casual as he raised his strength to block. However, right at this moment he suddenly noticed that something was wrong. Just as he raised his strength, the strength in his body seemed to leak and instantly disappeared without a trace. If Zhang Haoping had seen Luo Xining, he would know that his situation was exactly the same as Luo Xining's when she was disfigured. Luo Qingtong's qi silently hit a certain point in his body, triggering all the hidden dangers he had accumulated over the years. This method did not harm the body nor was it aggressive. Therefore, Zhang Haoping didn't notice anything. But when he fought, he would discover that the strength in his body had instantly disappeared. Although this power would return in the future. But now it was gone. Bang! The youth's punch landed squarely on his face. Zhang Haoping didn't even have the chance to dodge. His nose was instantly broken by the punch. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.